Good morning. My name is Aaron. I'm one of the pastors here at Ocean View. Thanks so much for being with us today. We're going to play a little game to get us started. I need your full participation, okay? Deal? That's the deal. So here we go. I'm going to start the phrase, and I just need you to finish it, okay? So you ready? Here we go. Peekaboo. I see you. Perfect. My wife and I were not sure if everybody got that, but I believed. I had faith in you all. Because here's the thing, that game that we play with toddlers and infants, that game that we play is a universal game. It's one that you can play not just here in America, but literally anywhere in the world. I've played it with my own kids here. I've traveled to other countries and met kids and played that game with them, and the reaction is always the same. The reaction is always, peekaboo, I see you, and then they laugh, they smile, and you can play it over and over and over again. What's interesting about this game is that sometimes parents will try to trick their kids, and maybe you've seen videos of this, or maybe you're guilty of doing this as well. We all are. Where you might take a blanket or a sheet and you might do peekaboo, and then you quickly swap parents or somebody else, or you make a change and then you say, I see you, and there's a look of distress on the infant's or toddler's face. And so there was some research done to kind of figure out, why is this game so universal? Why is it that this is something that you can play anywhere? And so there was some research done, and I wanted to share it with you this morning. It says the Swiss developmental psychologist John somebody I cannot pronounce called this principle object permanence, and suggested that babies spent the first 2 years of their lives working it out. And of course, those 2 years are prime peekaboo time. By the way, how fun would it be to have that job, just to research peekaboo, just for the record? Okay. Looked at it this way, the game isn't just a joke, but helps babies test and retest a fundamental principle of existence, that things stick around even when you can't see them. I love that line there. A fundamental idea to instill in us from the time that we're very small that things stick around even when we can't see them. And you know this as adults. We can't see the moon during the day all the time, but we know that it's there. We don't know that the sun is there, right? We can't see the sun at night, but we know that it's going to rise the next day. We can't see gravity, but we know it exists. And for some of us, we need to be reminded that that is something instilled in us from the time that we are very small, that just because we can't see it doesn't mean it's not there, especially as it relates to hope. Because some of us can't see hope, but that doesn't mean that it's not there. We've been having this conversation over the last several weeks that Pastor Terry has been bringing to us, and it's been an incredible journey, and we're wrapping up that conversation today. But just to kind of quickly recap, or if you're jumping into the middle of it, we said that God kind of wired us with two sides of our brain. We have a logical side and an emotional side. And what can happen with this logical and emotional side is that sometimes they come out of balance. A stressful event might happen in our life. It could be the loss of a loved one. It could be a relationship change, loss of a job, financial stress, any number of things that could cause trauma or stress in our life. And what happens when that happens, by the way, a worldwide pandemic also can do that. Yeah, we talked about that as well. And what happens is that emotional and logical side become into conflict with one another, and they get really close together, and there's not enough space or margin for us to be objective about what's going on around us. We kind of tie these things closer together, and without the space, we find ourselves in a state of disrepair, which is really just despair. And we talked about that a few weeks ago. And we said that as the church, it is our role in the world that when someone is experiencing despair, that we as the hands and feet of Jesus are there to make sure that they are seen. Because when we do that, we can help reconnect what's been disconnected. Seeing someone who doesn't feel seen helps reconnect what's been disconnected. Some of you have experienced that. Maybe you were in a place in your life where you didn't feel seen, and then somebody sees you, and they helped you to reconnect what had been disconnected. And last week, we started the conversation by trying to identify 5 ways that we can help someone repair what's been disconnected. If you've missed any of those conversations, I highly encourage you to go into our app, go online on YouTube, find those messages and watch them, because we're really jumping in at the last part and we're picking up right where we left off last week. But last week, we started the conversation of these 5 things and we looked at the first 2. The first one we said was to show up. And we looked at how Jesus did this. He modeled this for us. He showed up for other people. He was just being there, made all the difference in the world, being present. In fact, Jesus would oftentimes go out of his way, even when it was inconvenient for him, to let people know that he was there, to just be present with them in their moments of despair. And Jesus modeled that for us, for you and I, as an example to follow, that when we see someone who's experiencing despair, that we just show up for them to help them reconnect what's been disconnected. The second thing we said was that when we show up, we actually also need to see them. And that's super important, not just be there, but actually see them. And see them for who they are, see them for who they were created to be, and not label them with anything. We said that empathy matters a great deal in situations like this, where we understand, we pause our own life long enough to place ourselves in their situation and try to understand what they are going through. And too often times we said that we label people. We might just want to say, oh, they just need to get over it, or oh, I don't understand why they just can't move on. And we said how those things aren't really helpful for someone experiencing despair. But instead, when we have empathy, we're able to be there with them, to really show up and see them for who they are. And we also tried very, very carefully to define the differences between despair and depression, because sometimes we use those terms interchangeably, and that can actually be a little dangerous. So we defined despair this way. We said despair is a temporary negative outlook on a situation or life season, which daily tasks are continued and able to be accomplished. The idea that despair is a disruption, but it is temporary. It doesn't last forever. It's not ongoing. It is seasonal. It can be brought on any number of ways. You and I will all experience times of despair in our lives. But we said depression is a little different. We said depression is a prolonged and continual negative outlook on a situation or life season in which hope is lost and daily tasks are affected in a major way. So there's a big difference between despair and depression. We will all experience despair, or we know people who are in despair even right now. Some of you in this room or watching online may be going through a season of despair, or chances are you know someone who is. Depression, though, is a little different. It goes on for a very, very long time and disrupts life. So the first 2 things we said was to just make sure that we're there, we show up, and that we see them. And then Jesus models for us the rest of them so well. We're going to look at a story today that really encompasses all of these at once. And so we're going to jump into that. This third one is to just listen. And when I say that, some of you might be nudging people around you, be like, oh, see, this is for you. You need to just listen, right? That's me. I need to just listen sometimes. What I love about this is that God, the creator of the universe, who made each and every single one of us in his image, who jealously desires a relationship with each and every single one of us, he wants us to talk to him so he can listen. He already knows everything in our life, and yet he chooses to just listen to us, doesn't he? In Psalms, we see verse after verse after verse asking God to hear us, and then Jesus shows up on the scene, God in human form, to model for us what it's like when we just listen to one another. It's almost like when we're the hands and feet of Jesus, we're showing people what it's like to have a relationship with God when we just listen to them. And so Jesus models this for us in Mark chapter 5. Here we go. Jesus got into the boat again and went back to the other side of the lake, where a large crowd gathered around him on the shore. Then a leader of the local synagogue, whose name was Jairus, arrived, and when he saw Jesus, he fell at his feet, pleading fervently with him. "My little daughter is dying," he said. "Please come and lay your hands on her. Heal her so she can live." Jesus went with him, and all the people followed, crowding around him. Do you see the scene? There's a massive crowd of people here, and Jesus is there. He shows up. Right? He is fully present. And even in this crowd of people, he sees Jairus. Now, I imagine that everyone in that crowd wants some of Jesus' attention that day. But Jesus sees Jairus, and Jesus listens. Mark only records just that one simple phrase. But notice what Mark also said, that Jairus was pleading fervently. That doesn't mean that Jairus just said that one thing and was the end of it. Have you ever pleaded fervently with someone? That means you're going on and on and on and on about the same thing. And I imagine that in this moment of despair, Jairus just can't stop talking, that he's pleading fervently with Jesus, and Jesus sees him, and Jesus listens. He's fully engaged with what Jairus is saying in a crowd of people. He is just listening. I struggle with this. I'm going to throw myself under the bus. I struggle with just listening. My brain is wired different. I look at people, and you might be talking to me, and I am literally thinking of 1,000 other things happening in the room at the moment. That's me. In order for me to focus, I need distraction. It's a weird thing. But eye contact matters so much, doesn't it? There's a reason that eye contact matters, and it's peekaboo. Because from early childhood, that eye contact reconnects, doesn't it? And when it's something different, when it's jarring, we see the reaction. But eye contact helps us rewire. It's why we say, "Oh, just look into my eyes," to a loved one, right? We can think of their eye color. We say people's eyes sparkle. Eye contact communicates so much. And I imagine Jesus listening to Jairus with his eyes. And some of us need to listen with our eyes and have that eye contact that lets them know, "I see you. I am here for you." The second thing we need to do is to talk less. Some of you are laughing because you're like, yes, they do. Point your finger at yourself first. All right, here we go. But talking less, that's a struggle for us, because when we're listening to someone, sometimes we think we already know the answer, and we're so eager to insert our wisdom. But there's a reason James says, "Be quick to listen, slow to speak." I work with Myrtle Beach Area Children's Theater here in town. And we work with young kids who are learning to be actors. And one of the things that we teach them early on is that listening is so important, because sometimes when we're acting, we listen to respond, like we're listening to the other person say their line just so we can say ours. And sometimes when we're listening to other people, we're just listening, just so we can say what we think, don't we? And we try to teach them, no. When we're listening, it is one of the most selfless things that we can do. That when we take the time to actually listen to someone else, and we're not so eager to interject our thing, it is a place of honesty and selflessness and humility. So some of us need to talk less. And then Jesus demonstrates that third way that we can listen, and that's just to validate them. Notice that Jesus didn't interrupt Jairus. At any point in his pleading fervently, Jesus could have said to Jairus, "Hey, you know what? It's fine. I got this. I already know how this is going to turn out. Don't worry. Everything's going to be fine. You just need to calm down. You just need to get over it." Instead, he allows Jairus to emotionally exhale everything that he is feeling in this moment of despair. And Jesus validates him. He doesn't say a word. Instead, Mark writes that Jesus went with him. He walks beside him. He sees him. He listens to him, and then walks beside him. Doesn't dismiss it. And Jesus could have, because he can do anything. He could have said, she's fine, she's all better now. But he doesn't do that. Jairus has to wait. We're going to find out why in just a moment. But in this crowd of people, there's somebody else. There's another story being written as well. A woman in the crowd had suffered for 12 years with constant bleeding. She had suffered a great deal from many doctors, and over the years, she had spent everything she had to pay them, but she had gotten no better. In fact, she had gotten worse. She had heard about Jesus, so she came up behind him through the crowd and touched his robe. For she thought to herself, if I can just touch his robe, I'll be healed. Immediately, the bleeding stopped, and she could feel in her body that she had been healed of her terrible condition. This wasn't an illness or something that was visible to the eye. It wasn't like she was blind or had a limb that needed to be healed. It was something else, and she could feel it in her body, in the depths of her, that she was healed in that moment. But what's interesting to me about this woman is that while Jairus may be in a moment of despair, this woman had been living with this condition for 12 years. Now, if we were to go back to our definitions of despair and depression, I would imagine that this woman would fit this definition of depression, wouldn't she? Because dealing with an illness for a year or two, that might be a season of despair. But for 12 years, and to have her life interrupted, as we said depression does, to the point that daily tasks can no longer be completed, she had spent every dime she had looking for a cure. And she didn't get better, she got worse after every single visit to the doctor. For 12 years. To the point that in a crowd of people, she can't even bring herself to speak words to Jesus. In fact, she crouches along and thinks, if I can just touch his robe, that will be enough. I imagine this woman is isolated, and it is beyond despair. It's nearly hopeless. I can't imagine what 12 years of living that way does to someone. There's a psychologist who came up with an acronym after dealing with patients who were experiencing despair for long periods of time, what would turn it into depression. And he said it's like an infestation of ants, where all of a sudden you just have automatic negative thoughts all the time, where everything is, it's beyond Eeyore, right? Like it's just automatic negative thoughts. I imagine this woman, after every visit to the doctor and paying out and being worse and worse, her condition worsens to the point, her thought life just lessens to the point where everything is negative. Her outlook is so grim that she can't even talk to people anymore. She just thinks, oh, if I can just touch his robe, maybe then. And so Jesus is there. He shows up, and she could feel it in her that she was made well. Jesus realized at once that healing power had gone out from him, so he turned around in the crowd and asked, "Who touched my robe?" His disciples said to him, "Look at this crowd pressing around you. How can you ask who touched me?" But he kept on looking around to see who had done it, because he wants to see them, right? Then the frightened woman noticed that she's healed, she's better, but her thoughts are still one of fear, right? She's trembling at the realization of what had happened to her. She came and fell to her knees in front of him and told him what she had done. And she begins to just emotionally exhale everything. And Jesus is there, and he had shown up. He saw her, and he begins to listen to her as she tells this story. Luke records in his gospel that she unloads the entire story in front of the entire crowd. So it's not like just, Jesus, I was sick, and then you made me better. It's like, no, Jesus, I have been struggling with this for 12 years. Every time I went to the doctor, I haven't gotten better. I've lost my faith in people. I've lost my faith in doctors. I was on the verge of giving up completely, and then I touched your robe. I was made well. I just know it. I feel it. And Jesus sits and he listens to her. That's incredible. And then he does something. He models for us what you and I need to do, and that's to speak life. Because this woman who's been living with this for so long needs to hear life, needs to hear words of hope. That even when she can't see that hope, it's still there, right? So Jesus looks at her and says, "Daughter, your faith has made you well. Go in peace. Your suffering is over." He points her to a future. He points her to who she can be, to all of her potential, points her to life after she's been living in this anguish for 12 years. Her thoughts are still one of fear, perhaps. But Paul says something about our thoughts. Paul said that we should capture every thought we have. Do you know that we have about 6,200 thoughts a day? That's crazy, right? I don't know how we are at capturing each and every single one of them, but Paul says capture them and make them obedient to Christ. That means speaking life to other people. That also means speaking life to ourselves as well. So when you capture that thought, here's something that maybe would be useful. It's something that I think is very useful for me, is to think. Is the thought that you're having about yourself, is it true? Is it helpful? Is it inspiring? Is it necessary? Is it kind? When you have those thoughts to yourself, maybe you need to squash some of those ants by asking yourself that question. And speak life to yourself. Let Jesus speak life to your soul. Speak life into other people. Point them to something greater. Jesus said, "Daughter, your faith has made you well. Go in peace. Your suffering is over." He gives her a new future and a new identity. And some of us need to be reminded of our identity. That's who we are and whose we are in Christ. That hope that we have, that we are seen by him, that's foundational in us from the time we're born. That even when we can't see hope, it's still there. Speaking of hope, Jairus is still standing by. Remember, he came to Jesus first, and then this woman shows up. So we have these two stories, one of despair, one of depression, and Jairus is watching all of this unfold. Standing by. Where are his words of life? So when Jesus was still speaking to her, messengers arrived from the home of Jairus, the leader of the synagogue. And they told him, "Your daughter is dead. There's no use troubling the teacher now." You mean that while Jesus was listening to this other woman, that my daughter died? Where are my words of life? Where's the healing for my daughter? Why didn't you just speak the word in that moment? But Jesus overheard them and said to Jairus, "Don't be afraid, just have faith." Can you have hope? Do you believe it's still there even when you can't see it? Then Jesus stopped the crowd and wouldn't let anyone else go with him except Peter, James, and John, the brother of James. And when they came to the home of the synagogue leader, Jesus saw much commotion, weeping, and wailing. He went inside and asked, "Why all this commotion and weeping? The child isn't dead. She's only asleep." And the crowd laughed at him. But he made them all leave, and he took the girl's father and mother and his 3 disciples into the room where the girl was lying. Can you imagine Jairus in this moment? He's hanging on to just the shred of hope that he has left. Jesus came all this way. Jesus says that she's just asleep, but everyone else has said she's dead. He doesn't know what to do. His despair is on high. What's going to happen? Why didn't he just heal her? Why all of this? So a lot of research has been done to figure out why is it that some people stay in despair, and what separates them from the people who are able to overcome it. And really, the only thing they've really been able to pinpoint it to is that people who are able to overcome that despair They work through it, and they're building perseverance. They understand that there's hope even when they can't see it. Going back to just that intrinsic nature in all of us, something foundational in us, that we believe in more than what we can see. That we believe that our story's not over, that despair can be overcome. And Jairus, in the home with his girl dead upstairs, I imagine is having a hard time with that in that moment, but something is keeping him there. Something is holding him there to believe that this story isn't over yet. So holding her hand, Jesus says to her, Talitha cum, which means, little girl, get up. And the girl, who was 12 years old, by the way, as long as the other woman had been dealing with her issue, her condition, this girl had been alive. And immediately she stood up and walked around. They were overwhelmed and totally amazed. And Jesus gave them strict orders not to tell anyone what had happened. Yeah, right, like they're gonna do that. And then he told them to give her something to eat. She's probably hungry. Jesus swoops in and he shows up and he allowed Jairus to understand, listen, we're gonna build perseverance in you. Don't lose hope. So I don't know where you're at in this. I don't know where your loved ones are at in this. I don't know who's in your world that God has put you in the midst of that you need to show up for, that you need to see. You need to listen to them. You need to speak life into them and walk beside them to help them build perseverance, that this is not the end of their story. I need that. You need that. That's what the church is for. There's a whole world of people that need that. And followers of Jesus, he has equipped us. He has modeled for us what we can do for those around us. This morning, we've asked our team to just pause in our time together, to have a moment where maybe they speak some life into us. So they're gonna sing this song over us. Maybe you need to receive these words of life. Maybe you need to see that hope because you feel like it's gone. Or maybe you need to take these words and share them with someone else. As they sing, just think about the story that Jesus wrote for you, the story that he wants to write for everyone else, the story that he wrote for Jairus and that woman and his daughter. Let's speak life into our own thoughts, into the world around us.
Weary traveler, beat down from the storms that you have weathered. Feels like this road just might go on forever. Carry on. You keep on giving, but every day this world just keeps on taking. Your tired heart is on the edge of breaking. Carry on. Weary traveler, restless soul, you were never meant to walk this road alone. It'll all be worth it, so just hold on. Weary traveler, you won't be weary long. And no more searching. Heaven's healing's gonna find where all the hurt is. When Jesus calls, we'll lay down all our heavy burdens. Carry on and on, weary traveler, restless soul. You were never meant to walk won't be weary long. Someday soon we're gonna make it home. 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 Gonna make it home. Weary traveler, restless soul, you were never meant to walk this road alone. It'll all be worth it, so just hold on. Weary traveler, you won't be weary long. No, weary traveler, you won't be weary long. Weary traveler, you won't be weary long.
So those are words for us that maybe you needed, maybe you know someone who needs that. Here's what I know. I know that we're all going to go through a time in our life where we need someone to show up for us. So while we can, let's show up for someone else. Let's take time to see them. Let's take time to show up, to listen, to speak life, to walk beside them, to give them hope. Jesus did that for us. We can do that for others. Will you pray with me? God, thank you for your desire to heal every part of us. Things that people can see, but even the things that are inside of us, in our own minds. That your call to redemption, your call to salvation is every part of us. And that you are a healer. God, for those in this room who maybe can't even bring themselves to speak words to you, maybe they're just trying to reach out and touch your robe. God, give them life. Let your Spirit come. For those of us who call ourselves followers of Jesus, would you place us in opportunity and to not miss it? To show up, to go out of our way, even if it's inconvenient, to see someone, to listen. You have given us life. Let us speak life. You have given us hope. Let us build hope. For those in despair, God, would you let them know that you see them, even if they can't see you? Such a foundational thing, such a spiritual thing that you put in us. We know that you walk with us. God, let us be your hands and feet. Use us. Heal us. In the name of Jesus we pray. Amen.